In the news this week, the Yes campaign unveils its secret weapon in WA as the referendum battle heats up. A WAMA News exclusive.
Also tonight, a push for holistic refugee family reunion visas amidst the ongoing migration backlog. And what's next for the First Nations land heritage laws after the legislative backflip? Plus, Dr. Andrew Miller's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Loom and Maliva Thorne.
Good evening. The Voice to Parliament referendum campaign has officially begun this week, with the Yes camp in Western Australia revealing its secret weapon in the ongoing battle to secure critical multicultural votes for the success of The Voice. Despite recent polling indicating a no lead in WA, can the infusion of new talent and energy from the young guns within the Yes camp reverse the fortunes? One of the major Yes 2023 campaign teams based in Western Australia has revealed exclusively to WAMA News what will help their team win over voters in the referendum. Multicultural advocate and lead Yes campaigner Suresh Rajan has drawn on his team's diverse backgrounds to work with cowed voters.
And if there are any ethnic communities, any CAL communities out there that are looking for someone to come and talk to them, happy to do so. Any of us can come and talk, and we could come as a team and come and talk about what it is to go through that whole colonization process that we've been through in our own countries of origin, and would like to see the Aboriginal people recognised as being people who've gone through the same process themselves.
Mr. Rajan said that his team's major advantage is that of lived experience, many having families who were disposed under the British in either India or other parts of the world.
What we're trying to do is to say we understand what the issues are, not to the extent that Aboriginal people have had to deal with, but to a great extent we understand what the issues are of colonisation. And we're not talking on behalf of the people from the Aboriginal community, but we're speaking on behalf of all of the rest of the CAL community to say that this is a right that they need to support.
He then introduced the members of his team to WAMA News, who all came from diverse multicultural backgrounds. Kushi Bahati, who is working with policies and producers for the campaign, described her family's experience under the British colonisation.
I think coming from India, I had my grandfather working around these areas as well. So he worked with the freedom fighters back then. So I can understand what people actually go through when they are being colonized.
Helen Trill, who is focused on digital content and social media for the team, also discussed the similar experiences between migrants and Indigenous Australians.
We have a special understanding for Aboriginal people. Maybe not to the same extent, but we understand how they were ostracized and, separated from the place that they live in.
Avatia Narajarith, who also worked on the team's social media, criticised No campaign, who are seeking to stop the Voice to Parliament.
The thing that I've seen the most, especially from the No campaign, is that if you don't know, then vote no. That's their motto right now, and that I just find that ridiculous. If you don't know, you should be learning, not blindly making a choice.
Ali Hussain, who works on websites and social media for the campaign, believes that social media will be the most important way to share information.
I think that's the biggest outreach for people to get information, and it's also the largest percentage that people get swayed by. People see both sides of the argument online, and then they'll make their opinion made based on what they see.
And finally, Bailey Fernandez, the Executive Officer for Ethnic Communities Council, left WAMA News with a strong call to action.
See, I think we got to really remember the world is looking at us right now. We are a developed nation. We need to do the right thing. If you ever believed that we were not getting things right, this is the time to make it right. Vote yes and make it right.
With polling day set on the 14th of October, the team will have several weeks to convince CAL voters on why they should vote yes in the upcoming referendum. It's yet to know how the No campaign will respond to the Yes campaign strategy in WA.
Migration continues to rise in Western Australia as the visa system backlog remains an unsolved issue. Refugees in Australia, on the other hand, are facing even longer delays and hardship for family reunion approvals as academics are urging policy changes to reflect a more holistic approach. Eleanor McKee reports.
As Australia reopens following the pandemic, the rise of immigrants maintains and hampers the government's attempts to reduce the cost of living crisis. But what is less talked about is the current visa application process and how it is failing refugees. This week, Marianne Kenny, Associate Law Professor at Murdoch University, discussed her reform proposal concerning family refugee applications.
When people are leaving a country, it's usually because if they're a refugee, it's because they're forced to, not because they want to. And it's about trying to get safety first, and then they're very worried about their families that may be in other countries or left behind. So it's extremely important for those families to have an idea around how they're going to reunite with their loved ones.
Immigration documents remain a massive obstacle in the current family visa process for refugee applicants, whether that be a lack of documentation or issues around the terminology and criteria for parents, children and partners. Another concern not addressed in the current process is the disclosure of LGBTQIA+ applicants.
You'll find that people have had to suppress their relationships and information about their relationship. So when they come to Australia, part of what you have to do to get a partner visa is to say that I have an ongoing relationship with a person and provide information and evidence of that relationship. If you come from a country where that is unlawful or there is persecution or discrimination, they just may have really significant issues around demonstrating evidence of that relationship. So how can we think about, eliminating some of those barriers?
Kenny seeks a more holistic approach, one that has a specialised team in the Department of Home Affairs and one that offers greater legal aid to families so that those separated can be rapidly reunited with their loved ones. Eleanor McKee, WAMN News.
Hi there. Are you looking for a new home or want to refinance your car mortgage to get a better rate? At AA Finance Solutions, we have the expertise and knowledge to help you to find the right loan for your needs and budgets. Contact us today. Let us help you to make your home ownership dream a reality.
AA Finance Solutions, your local mortgage broker.
We must do better. That's the message during this week's crisis talks against domestic and family violence in Perth. Speakers were given the opportunity to voice their experiences and changes needed to reduce the scourge within the community. Two major recommendations were made during the meeting, with calls to establish a special family and domestic task force to deal with priority cases across WA. Stakeholders also proposed an advisory group formed by survivors and victims' family members to create effective services and programs. The government has acknowledged the powerful meeting provides a pathway for change.
The implementation of the ban on the initial items outlined in Stage 2 of Western Australia's leading nationwide plastics plan is effective as of this week. Among the items targeted in Stage 2 are non-compostable plastic takeaway coffee cups, plastic produce bags for fruit and vegetables, moulded expanded polystyrene packaging, uncovered trays, as well as lids for takeaway bowls, plates, cups and containers, excluding pre-packaged foods like sandwiches and sushi. Retailers and suppliers failing to strategise or make an endeavour to transition and intentionally continuing to provide banned items could be subject to fines amounting to $5,000 for individuals or up to $25,000 for corporate entities.
The WA government has announced direct flights between Perth and Ho Chi Minh City on Vietnam Airlines. These flights will begin later this year on the 7th of December, though tickets are available to be bought now. According to the government, the new flights will create a brand new tourism market, with almost 43,000 people will fly to Perth per year using the service. It will also further strengthen the state's airline within Southeast Asia and the WA's Vietnamese relationship.
But Vietnam we're seeing as an essential partner to West Australia into the future, a very strong people-to-people relationship, a growing economic relationship, and now the ability to fly directly into Vietnam. I think we excite those Vietnamese people wanting to come WA, and of course there's a lot of West Australians who want to explore Vietnam too. So I think from both perspectives it'll assist with the Vietnamese tourism, but of course WA tourism too.
WA Police are implementing the department's brand new victim engagement training for new recruits and current officers. Authorities are working closely with Cassius Turvey's mother Michelle to deliver the program. The Take 5 program aims to provide better understanding for the needs of victims of crime. WA Police Commissioner Cole Blanche says it's important for police officers to show care and respect for victims during their time of need. Mrs. Turvey hopes the training course will improve police and community engagement.
All you need to do is one thing, and that's be yourself. And as Steve said, caring is why this whole thing is called Take 5, because that's all it takes. Whether it's 5 seconds or 5 minutes, that's all it takes to actually engage.
And now here's Leo Puglisi with what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thanks, guys. On 6 News, Peter Dutton promises another referendum on recognition if the Voice fails to get up and the coalition is elected, as the Yes campaign looks to an iconic anthem to promote its message. Authorities investigate a video posted to social media following a horror hit-and-run crash that killed 2 siblings in Sydney's southwest, and a man who repeatedly struck a police officer with a bat during a COVID-19 lockdown ordered to pay $75,000 in compensation. Watch live whenever you want on our YouTube channel and our website, 6newsau.com. For now, though, it is back to you.
Thanks, Leo. With the controversial land heritage law set to be scrapped, there are plenty of questions about what will happen next.
That's right. Public interest has not waned. For more on this, here's Grace Harrington with WP. Good evening, Grace.
Thanks, Ivan and Melly. Welcome to Western Perspective. I'm Grace Harrington. It's been almost a month since the government's astonishing backflip on the controversial First Nations cultural heritage laws. For the farming community, there is still a huge amount of work that needs to be done as amendments to the old legislation get underway. Many stakeholders are fighting to have their voices heard, and so the government is facing the enormous challenge of modernising the laws to ensure that they are fair and non-divisive for all Western Australians. We find out how things are progressing in this special feature interview.
The law has not been scrapped. The Premier said that he will do that, but it hasn't been scrapped. They are going to put some amendments into the Parliament to the 1972 Act, and that will happen at some point in the future. But the Act that came into play on the 1st of July is the one under which we are currently being governed. So although certain undertakings were given about larks and a whole range of other things, this Act that the Premier promised to repeal is still the one that's at play in our community today.
So will the law be taking effect at the moment or not really?
I think that quite wisely from their point of view, they've decided to step back a bit. So the whole concept of the more onerous components have been scrapped. The issues that came up with the sort of empowerment of certain people within the Indigenous community seem to have faded away. If the Premier is to be trusted at his word, then this Act will cease to exist when the amendments to the old Act are put in play. But he indicated he'd do this in a hurry, and it does seem as though it won't be until almost the end of the year before we see the scrapping of the Act and the new Act amended come into play. So, look, we're not out of the woodwork yet, and there's a grave amount of concern in the community that even if the Premier doesn't get this piece of legislation in play in the way he'd like to, the federal government have actually got something very similar to the ACH hovering in the wings, and I think they're probably waiting to see what happens with the referendum. And if it is soundly defeated, then we probably won't hear too much about it. But if for argument's sake, the yes vote carried the day, we could easily see federally a piece of legislation just as onerous and just as dangerous to the broader community as the state legislation was going to be.
But isn't it true that it's important to separate both issues, both the Aboriginal Land Heritage Act and the voice to Parliament? Because
you can't. You can't. You cannot for 1 second do
they
that.
are two different things. How can you not put it beside?
But they're linked together. They're linked together because what actually happened with the ACH Act that came into play in the 1st of July was that a whole bunch of people within the more aggressive side of the Indigenous community suddenly saw this as a real opportunity to have a crack, to jump in and do some things that were not within the broader spirit of the Act. And the as I said before, the moderates will actually promote the case of the referendum, but the radicals will take charge of it once it's in place, and they will squeeze every last drop of control, power, and influence and money that they can out of it. And so, although I have no criticism for the moderates, I'm gravely concerned about the more aggressive side, and we saw that in WA. There was never any intention to stop people from planting trees in a degraded river system, or a number of other things that were at play that were good community and good outcomes for the environment. They were good outcomes. But we saw people suddenly stand up and say, "It's not your land, it's my land, and I will tell you exactly what you can and you can't do on my land." And what we're seeing continuously is, "You've stolen my land. It's my land. I'm a traditional owner." All those sorts of phrases make people like myself and those thinking members of the community gravely concerned about where this might take us to, because it's our land. It belongs to all of us. It doesn't belong to one sector of the community. And for heaven's sake, no one stole it.
Okay, so what's the next step from the legislation? Because your association has a lot of work to do, and also a lot of advocacy and argument to do for the farming community and also the pastoralists as well.
I mean, if we protect the interests of our members and their farmers and pastoralists, we are protecting the interests of every single citizen in Western Australia that owns private property. We're protecting the economy. We're protecting the future of our nation. When you actually attack private property rights, you're attacking the fundamental things that underpin our society today. And I think that what happened with the kickback that the Premier suffered when he introduced the law was a clear recognition that ordinary people in the community, they knew what was going on here, and they were gravely concerned, because even if it didn't impact them directly, indirectly it was going to.
So one of the things I do want to ask you is, what are the specific parts of the legislation that you'll be targeting priority one to get rid of, in your view?
Look, mostly it's about the right of people that own property to go about their daily business without feeling as though they need to get permission from somebody else. And what was embedded in the legislation as it was the creation of these LARCs that were to determine whether you were even going to be allowed to do what you had previously been allowed to do on your private property. So we're not talking about a farmer in the wheat belt of Western Australia. We're talking about people that own small blocks of land, anything more than 1,100 square metres, vineyards, fruit growers, intensive poultry, pigs, grapes, anything that was to do with agriculture came under this particular act. And to do the most basic things that you've always been used to doing on your property, you were going to need to go through a due diligence process, then engage with a LARC, local Indigenous Aboriginal Corporation, and seek their permission to do what you wanted to do. And as part of that permission, they were going to come onto your property and inspect it to see whether there was anything to do with culture or heritage on that piece of land. And this was outrageous. How on earth they ever thought that this was ever going to fly, that this was a fair thing, I've got no idea. And I think what concerned people most of all was the heritage side of it. No one wants to destroy heritage, no matter whose heritage it is. That shouldn't happen. But it was the culture side of it, the absolutely unmeasurable concept of culture. And look, culture, there's lots of religious groups in Australia, the Jews, the Muslims, the Christians, the Hindus, all sorts of groups. And there's never been any overt willingness of any of those groups to inflict themselves on the broader community. But the culture side of the Indigenous argument has been that it's about timelines, it's about rivers, it's about woggles, it's about serpents, it's about a whole range of things that they have every right to believe in. There's no issue about that, but not to inflict that on other people. Religious freedom is a great thing, but it also means believe what you'd like to believe in, but don't press it onto other people.
What will be the PGA's next step when it comes to safeguarding your members' rights? Because at the end of the day, there are other stakeholders such as Indigenous corporations, such as government, such as local councils, and all the other businesses and property developers. How are you going to balance your interest compared to other people's interest?
I don't think we have any issue with any of those groups that you just mentioned, local government, developers, none there at all. I think it's the Indigenous side of this, and there's a real feeling out here in the bush that you can't have it both ways. You can't have sort of a right to occupy an Indigenous land use agreement and then abrogate that and demand even more. There's a sort of a fair balance in all of this, but the greatest threat to us will be the massive overreach of some of the more radical elements of the movement. or the industry. This industry that's costing our nation $38 billion a year, $100 million a year. I saw someone stand up a while ago, a young Indigenous lady, absolutely outraged, demanding compensation and reparations. And I felt like saying, look, hey, there's $100 million a day coming your way right now. How much more? What will be enough? When will you actually be satisfied that you've got enough? And look, if 35% of the Indigenous population in Australia lives in the cities, in regional areas is another 45%, then the balance of them actually are in the communities, and they're the ones that need the help most of all. But there are a lot of people that are doing very, very, very nicely at the moment that regard themselves as Indigenous, and somehow or another they're very eager to climb on the gravy train. There's a huge amount of money to be had here, and the industry where the elites within the movement reside ought to be ashamed of itself, because for the amount of money that's being spent and for the outcomes that these people that purport to represent their people are actually achieving, not a referendum, we should be having a Royal Commission. We really should, into how on earth can so much money be spent and so little achieved as a result of it.
And so the discussion continues. You can read more of our weekly premium stories now on the WAMN Extra News Club, supporting independent local news and keeping democracy strong. And now, here is Dr. Andrew Miller with his weekly medical and news commentary.
Hi, thanks for your time and happy Father's Day. I think Father's Day is a time really for gratitude, and for me it's gratitude for my dad, who's no longer with us, but who, although we had our clashes from time to time, still gave an example of someone who was prepared to think for himself, who was not particularly impressed by money or by status in life, but was more interested in the substance and the integrity of people and what it was they were contributing, and I think held himself to a high standard as to what he wanted to contribute to the world. And maybe as a teenager, those aren't lessons that you ever appreciate and acknowledge for what they are, but they become part of your existence as life goes on. And of course, the other big piece of gratitude today is for the children that we have. And so I can't think of any more important aspect of my life than my family, and in particular the pride and the joy that I take in seeing my kids grow up to be thoughtful individuals who display empathy towards others and kindness, and who critically approach social issues in a way that they try to work out how this is affecting people who are more vulnerable than them. A lot of our kids have had a pretty lucky start in life living in this part of the world compared to many other places, and that's what I'm thinking about on this Father's Day, of how grateful I am for the wider community and the opportunities that it's afforded all of us. Looking forward, I hope that that can be extended to even more members of our community, and that out of all of the prosperity and the good things we have here, we're able to reach out and help in other places as well. Thanks very much for your time.
That was Dr. Andrew Miller, and that's Western Perspective for now. I hope you have enjoyed the series just as much as I have. It's back to you now, Ivan and Melly.
Thanks, Grace. And before we go, tomorrow is Ivan's birthday. Happy birthday, Ivan.
Thanks for the shout out, Melly. I'll certainly remember to do yours next time.
No worries. And that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website, wamnnews.com.au.
Don't forget to subscribe to the WAMN Extra News Club so we can continue our work in the community. Full details on wamnnews.com.au/news/extra. From Melly, Grace and myself, wish you good health, good night. See you next Sunday.
Thanks for watching.